This is Diane Murray at Southern Art Gallery, and today we are painting on a canvas, a little inexpensive canvas panel that I have coated with watercolor ground. I'm teaching a course in my advanced class on different substrates, and we're going to be painting on watercolor ground by Daniel Smith. This is one I did earlier, and this is on Crescent watercolor board, and it has a coat or two of, I'm not sure, I can't remember, but it's one or two coats of the watercolor ground, and as you can see, it did not take well. I do not like these boards. I do not recommend them. They're basically paper, compressed paper from what I can tell, and they do not take the watercolor well. You can see that I think this is from the ground itself, but you can see how uneven it is, and they just aren't my favorite thing to paint on. So I have used this little panel to see how this one would do. So we're going to play around with this and see if it does a better job than this. Now, with more coats of watercolor ground, this will be fine. But I think I just didn't put enough watercolor ground on here, and as you can see, the paper has started to separate from the actual substrate, and I think they use a poor quality watercolor paper on these panels. Just my thought. Anyway, so I've laid down a wash of cerulean blue over this entire thing, and now we're just going to go back and strengthen. This is we'll go ahead and do the water. And this is just a cerulean blue with a little ultramarine to make it darker. And I'm going to make this an uneven wash because I want some of this green to show through and look like waves. And of course, if you want the look of waves, you need to just turn your panel on its side. And that'll mimic waves nicely. At the same time, I'm going to take lemon yellow and the tiniest bit of cerulean, and I'm going to pick up this beautiful pale green color that is under here. Let's add a little bit more yellow. And I'm just going to drop it in here and there. In a wet mixture. Get it darker over here. And the same thing. We'll just let it do that. And since these waves have darker places in them, I'm just going to drop some dark in here and let it run. And we'll be darkening this until we get it to the value that where there's a nice contrast. Darker over here. Just softening that a little bit. And darker up here. I like to build up watercolor gradually. It's just the way I paint. Some painters do alla prima, and they paint it all at once. That's just not the way I learned to paint, and I do it occasionally, but it's rare. This is usually the way that I paint. And if you want much more profound waves, you can take a spritz bottle and just spritz some of it and let it run. Like this. And get a nice watery look. The thing about painting water is if you use the water and the movement of the water to actually paint the water, you get a much more realistic look. See, I like that. We'll soften that a little bit. Now, when you paint on this watercolor ground on a substrate like this, it's very easy for the underneath paint to be lifted. So you have to have a very light touch when you're painting on these type of watercolor grounds. At least that's been my experience. So what I'm going to do, I should probably let this totally dry so that it doesn't bleed up into the sky. So I'm just going to dry that real quick and I'll be right back. Okay, we're back. Now I am going to turn this upside down and I'm going to go from the horizon line up. And if you notice that when you're painting a sky, the horizon line is always more gray. So we'll put in a little, just get that down a little bit where it's a little softer. There. And paint around these clouds, which we can lift out. One nice thing about this, the ground, is it's very easy to wipe out. And I'm not being too precious with this. It's just a little painting to actually to let people learn about painting on watercolor ground. So, and you can put pretty much watercolor ground on anything. You have to be a little careful on some things, but it really, I'm just keeping a bead wet here. If you keep a bead on your painting, it won't dry out, and you won't have definite lines here. Now, at the zenith of the sky is always darker at the zenith, and this is the zenith of the sky. So, and again, because the sky is generally, the clouds are horizontal, you can also do that and place it on the side. I'm just darkening some of the areas under the clouds, so it looks like they have a shadow under them. And then I would be sure to dry this between each layer because it is so easily lifted. You really have to do that.